We're here with creator, writer, aficionado, superstar, Stephen Falk.
All those things, yeah.
All those things, indeed. Let's jump back to Weeds, way back.
Okay, yeah.
How did that all come about? That was such a big move by Showtime to go that direction, and it obviously started some major careers with, Miss Cohen, obviously, and the rest of the gang. But how did that all kind of come to fruition? How did you get into that?
Well, I didn't come on until season 5, so but I know that Genji had come out of network TV but was always kind of an iconoclast and didn't spend a lot of time on each show because it wouldn't really work out. She worked on Friends and Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and a lot of stuff, and she had her own briefly airing show called The Stones, and then she had this idea, and I think Showtime at the time, it was just coming out of a kind of a transition period. Bob Greenblatt had taken over, and to his benefit, he thought that a show about a suburban housewife widow who sells pot would be a good idea, and it just took off. And I think it started sort of. I think it's credited with Showtime's emergence as a competitor to HBO. So I worked on that for 4 seasons, and it just came about. I was a feature writer, and then I started writing, selling a lot of pilots because I was a feature writer, and they think you're fancy if you're a feature writer, and you get to do that. And then at a certain point, I just wanted to learn how to actually make TV. So I took sort of a bit of a demotion to working on a staff on a show, but I learned everything doing that.
Why did you take that choice? I mean, not just to learn, but it seemed like you kind of wanted to expand. I mean, what made you choose that, not a different route?
I thought Weeds was one of the best written shows on television, and I didn't want to go do a network show, but I thought that specifically if any of my pilots had gone to series, I wouldn't have known what I was doing, and they would have absolutely put if an inexperienced person's pilot gets picked up to series or even to shooting a pilot, they'll put a showrunner above you, and it won't be your show anymore, and I didn't want that to happen.
Well, I'm curious then, with Orange is the New Black, was obviously she brought in some writers from Weeds, but it seems like since it was so new and fresh, no one knew what Netflix was going to do. What was that process like? That must have been kind of whirlwind.
To work on Orange?
Yeah.
Well, the Orange didn't come. I left Weeds at the end to go do my own NBC show. That failed, and then I sort of went from being a showrunner, then going back to being not a staff writer. I was co-executive producer, but I was just on staff, and I was joining Orange in its 2nd season. So yeah, that process was weird because I went from being the boss not to being the boss anymore. But also I was joining a show in its 2nd season, and they had a very tight crew already, and I was the guy, excuse me, from her old show. So it was like a woman had a family, got divorced, started a new family, and then one of the kids from the first family came and infiltrated the second family. So there's a little bit of suspicion and a little bit of like, oh, well, who are you? But it to her benefit, she hired really nice people, and it worked out, and everyone was very welcoming.
Well, I'm curious, and with You're the Worst, did you always think FX, or did you think, let's go back to the studios now that I've at least been through that process, even though it failed? You've been in those studios before.
You mean the networks?
Yeah. Did you pitch You're the Worst to the networks at all?
No, I only went to FX.
Why?
I wish I could say that I knew that I wanted to work for FX only, but to be honest, FX asked me to come pitch them a show. So I tailored that pitch specifically for them because I wanted to work for them and they wanted to hear something. And often you'll go and pitch a show and you'll have to go to numerous places, but with FX, I was lucky. I made the pitch and I was prepared to go elsewhere with it, but they bought it right when I went in and pitched it to them.
Was it a different atmosphere behind the scenes? I mean, did they give you kind of leeway to do what you were hoping to do with the show, or?
Yeah. FX was very, very hands off, and when they were hands on, when they did give me suggestions, I would listen because I knew they were genuine and they weren't coming from a place of just feeling like they had to put their claws into the product. A lot of networks really want to feel like they have control, and FX is secure enough to allow the showrunners to do their own thing. And they just stand back and facilitate it, and then occasionally offer suggestions. And if you're smart, you'll listen to it because they're really intelligent people.
Well, I'm curious then, did it always start off as a British lead, or?
No, You're the Worst. I wrote the guy as American, but then when I couldn't find him in auditions, and then I got this tape from this tall, handsome blonde British guy, and he was so fucking good. I was just like, oh my God, this is the guy. And I think it's important when you create a show or a character to be flexible enough to alter your original vision if you find the right actor. I think if I had really held on and said no, he was supposed to be kind of maybe pudgy and not that great looking and American, I would have ended up with a very different show. But I was flexible enough to recognize that what made him sort of caustic and aggressive didn't have to change if he was really good looking and British. In fact, Brits, because of their accent, can get away with saying way worse shit. And that was a benefit of casting a Brit.
You know, when I was watching this show, I kind of grew up on British comedies. And
sure.
Were you a fan of British comedy? Because it doesn't read like an American show. There seems to be like I don't know, I thought of like the darker like coupling with the sex humor and Shameless with kind of the, you know, you guys are not afraid to do anything really on the show. I'm curious, what inspired your writing this story, I guess?
Well, I certainly grew up on and continued to be a fan of British sitcoms, and that was definitely an inspiration. I always liked romantic comedies, and I thought that the romantic comedies, however, had gone through a real stale period. I used to like that show Mad About You. I thought that was, at least had at its heart, a really kind of loving and funny relationship. Was a good look at that. So this was sort of my attempt to do a Britishy, cabley, updated version of Mad About You. That's where that came out of. Because I thought that British sitcoms were allowed to portray bad behavior in a way that was non-judgmental, and then ended up not only being funnier because they didn't have rules and they weren't worried about likability, but really ended up being more accurate because most of us are scumbags, or at least behave like scumbags at certain periods in our life. And I also I'd gone through a weird re-entry back into the dating world after a divorce, and so it came out of how horrible dating is also.
Where did each one of their best friends come from? Because they're on their own. They could be their own TV show.
I think in a romantic comedy you kind of necessarily have to give the leads a best friend. It's just sort of what happens because they're dating, so they need someone to kind of use as a sounding board. I also, however, I'm very aware of the cliches of romantic comedies, and you never want to just make someone only exist as a sounding board to someone else, because that's just not how we are. We're all the center of our own drama. And so indeed, there's an episode in the first season of You're the Worst where the two side characters are alone, and they have been stood up by our two main characters, and they have this conversation. They're like, oh my God, shit, I think we're sidekicks. And they try to rebel against it, and it doesn't really work. But then individually, I thought it would be good to give her a former partner in crime who is now married, sort of, and wasn't liking it, to kind of represent what her life could have become, or could still become if the relationship progresses. And with Edgar, I was just always interested in veterans' rights. And it seems weird, but I thought FX would be a place that would let me talk about veterans' rights. And I think what America does to our veterans is pretty awful, and the way we discard them. So it was my kind of chance to get a little of my politics into the show.
Wow. So are you planning on revealing more of yourself through the next season? I mean, have you started writing already?
No, we haven't started writing. We're gearing up to start writing in about a month or so. So I'm not sure what's going to happen, to be honest, yet.
Well, I'm curious the structure of the show. I mean, where you kind of take them with the journey of starting with them at a wedding, and it ends, with a similar type party structure.
Right.
Was that always there, or did that just kind of fit into the framework?
Well, I don't think, I mean, yes, the wedding at the beginning was always there because that's a romantic comedy cliche. There's always a wedding. And I thought it'd be good if two people, instead of meeting cute, met kind of ugly at a wedding and went back and immediately had sex and then figured it out from there. But I don't think I necessarily meant for it to end always at another party, but I did always want the first season to end where it does, which is them sort of taking another step. Not only because I want the story to always progress, but I think it's nice to end a season with a little bit of a hint of what might come next season, but also a little bit of the audience going, oh my God, like a little bit of intrigue. And hopefully that's what I gave with what happens in the finale.
You definitely do, yeah.
Okay, good.
So do you write are you writing outside of this just to keep fresh, or do you have any other ideas coming about?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kicking around a few ideas. I have a pilot at another studio that we're trying to get set up again. It used to be at Showtime, and now it's not. But that's an hour long, and it's a very different thing. But I'm kind of wanting to focus on the FX show, so I'm writing a movie right now.
Wow. Can you give us any scoop on that? Where are you going with that?
I'm adapting a book. It hasn't been announced, but I've been hired to adapt a book into a movie. And since I used to write movies, it's sort of warming up an old muscle and trying to do it again. But movies are very different, man. Like, writers have no control, and I kind of like that. Just spending this whole last year being the only executive producer on You're the Worst, I'm involved in every single decision. Every single decision is mine, except for the ones FX has to make. It's nice to know that I'm going to write the script and then they're going to do whatever they want with it. Even if it's hiring someone else to rewrite me, it's not my baby anymore.
Is that kind of crazy to think that you might have to do that?
Well, no, because I'm very well versed in the realities of writing features, because I was rewritten every time, and and never saw my name on any of the movies or final scripts. So, movies are one thing. I love the movies, but it's not a writer's medium. TV is a writer's medium, so that's where I spend most of my time.
What's it like being in a writers' festival? Being here at Austin Film Festival, it's different than most film festivals. It concentrates on the writing.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of the writer, and I think that it is up to those of us who are in a certain position to, help share our experience. I think it behooves us, and it's sort of beholden on us to help, inform the people coming up what to expect, and also to maybe educate a little bit. And I really like doing that. I love talking to writers. I have a writers group at my house where I do a lot of babbling at other writers and sharing wisdom. And I do the Writers Guild has a showrunner training program, and I go and speak at that, trying to tell the next generation of the people who will be showrunning in a few years what to do and what mistakes not to make. I think it's both educates the teacher, but also is sort of the good thing to do.
What snacks do you serve at your writers group in your house?
I usually serve wine, and then I'll have like 3 bowls. Often there'll be nuts. Sometimes there'll be something sweet, like maybe a yogurt-covered pretzel or a cookie. And then I'll have something salty, like a chip.
Wow. Well, I guess the final question, I won't leave it on a...
You can, that's... food's important.
Food's very important. Well, I guess, how can we keep track of you? I mean, you have your website, do you want to...
Yeah, StephenFalk.com is where sort of you can read, but I'm kind of active on Twitter, and it's just Stephen Falk, and I make a lot of dumb jokes.
Speaking of that, is it like you don't have a filter? It seems like on Twitter. Is that fun?
I do have a filter on Twitter because I'll tell you this: the worst thing about being a showrunner is I don't get to talk shit about other TV shows on Twitter because that's all I would like to do. I really envy critics, and I'm friends with a lot of them, and who get to watch shows and then say how awful they are. I wish I could do that. I started out doing that on Television Without Pity, and I love it. I love talking shit, and I can't do it anymore. But yeah, no, I don't have a huge filter, but this is a great job where I get to get paid from making titty jokes, and that's the best. So I don't think the career I've set out to have, I don't think anyone's going to read a dick joke I make on Twitter and be like, oh no, he's too dirty. That's not going to happen because my show is filthy.
Well, I won't ask what shows you hate, but
yeah.
I guess the real final question, what do you watch? What do you enjoy?
I'm really finicky right now. I'm starting to like The Affair on Showtime. I think that's kind of interesting.
Oh, that's a very different show than.
Oh yeah. I don't just like comedies or anything. I don't like a lot of comedies right now. I'm sorry to say. I like It's Always Sunny. I love Broad City. I think that's great. I like Veep a lot. I think Veep's real funny. I saw a movie called Whiplash. I really like that. Y'all see that?
Yeah.
Super good movie. I watch so right now I'm watching at least one episode of all the new shows, and then hating almost all of them.
I think that's the best way to end the interview.
All right.
Awesome.
Sorry, but I hate a lot of your shows.